There is a moment, subtle but life-changing, when you finally begin to suspect that the voice in your head is not entirely your own. You hear a thought, and for a flicker of an instant, something in you stands apart from it. You sense a distance you have never noticed before, a separation between the one who thinks and the one who observes the thinking. And in that quiet space, hidden beneath the noise of daily life, a mysterious truth begins to reveal itself. Not every thought in your mind was born from you. For most of your life, you have assumed that your thoughts are your identity. You have taken ownership of every fear that rose inside you, every insecurity that whispered through you, every dark idea that drifted across your consciousness. You have merged with them, believed them, followed them, defended them. And in that merging, you began to mistake thinking for being. But thought is not being. Thought is a movement, not a self. Thoughts come and go, but you remain. Thoughts shift and change, but something in you is constant. Thoughts contradict themselves, but awareness does not. If thoughts were truly you, you would not be able to witness them. You would not be able to question them. You would not be able to step back from them. You would not be able to feel the difference between who you are and what they say. The mind produces thoughts the way the sky produces clouds, continuously, naturally, impersonally. Yet somewhere along the way, you were taught to personalize them. You were taught that every thought that enters your mind is a sign, a truth, a revelation about who you are. You were never told that thoughts often carry the voices of others, the voices of parents, teachers, abusers, crowds, culture, trauma, and past generations. You were never taught that the mind is porous, that fear can enter through thought the way cold enters through an open window. And so fear became your companion, not because danger was near, but because thought was loud. Fear rarely begins with reality. It begins with a thought, an image, an idea, a possibility, a memory, a prediction. It begins with a whisper that says, "What if?" and then injects the if with all the emotion of a real threat. The mind conjures a phantom, and the body reacts as if the phantom were flesh and blood. Fear is thought wearing the mask of urgency. The body trembles, the heart races, the breath shortens, but the danger is internal, not external. What you fear is not happening to you. It is happening inside you. It is a projection, a simulation, a constructed possibility that thought has dressed in emotional clothing. And because the emotion is real, the thought feels real. This is how fear deceives. It borrows the energy of the body to convince the mind. But fear has a deeper deception. It pretends to be you. You do not hear fear as an intruder. You hear it as your own inner voice. Thought speaks in the first person. I can't. I'm in danger. Something is wrong with me. I won't make it. I'm going to fail. The language of fear impersonates your identity, and because you have never questioned this impersonation, you follow it. Fear is not powerful. Identification with fear is powerful. The moment you believe that a fearful thought comes from your true self, the moment you give it authority, it becomes a command. It becomes a lens that distorts perception. It becomes a force that shapes your choices. It becomes a ghost puppeting the living. It becomes a chain held by a hand you cannot see. The courage you seek is not the absence of fear. It is the recognition that fear is not you. Courage begins the moment you watch a fearful thought without merging with it. When you say, "This is a thought," instead of "This is me," when you feel the emotion but refuse to obey the command, when you allow the fear to rise without fighting, without following, without fleeing. Fear cannot survive being witnessed. It relies on unconsciousness. It relies on immediacy. It relies on the assumption that its voice is your voice. When you create distance, fear loses its authority. When you separate identity from thought, fear becomes like thunder in the distance, loud, but harmless. When you see the phantom as a phantom, it stops chasing you. This seeing is the beginning of awakening, but awakening is painful at first, because to awaken is to realize how many years you have lived under the influence of thoughts that were never yours. Thoughts that were implanted by family patterns, thoughts inherited from cultural conditioning, thoughts shaped by trauma, thoughts planted by people who wanted to control you, thoughts whispered by your own unhealed wounds, thoughts echoing the fear of previous generations. The mind carries voices that do not belong to the soul, and when you awaken, you begin to hear them with new clarity. You begin to notice how often your thoughts speak in tones you learned from others. You begin to see how your fears mimic the fears of those who raised you. You begin to recognize that the thought patterns driving your anxiety are not native to your spirit. They are inherited. You have been carrying other people's fears as if they were your nature. This realization is shattering at first. You feel a sense of betrayal, as if life had tricked you. You feel grief for the years stolen by false thoughts. You feel anger at the patterns that shaped you without your consent. But beneath the anger, beneath the grief, beneath the shock, something sacred begins to form. A sense of separation. Not separation from others, but separation from the false self. The false self is the accumulation of thoughts you identified with. The false self reacts to every fear, every insult, every doubt. The false self seeks comfort, approval, validation. The false self worries, panics, resents. The false self lives in the past and in imagined futures. The false self is shaped entirely by thought. The true self is the one who sees the false self. The true self is not afraid of thought. The true self is not controlled by thought. The true self does not argue with thought, nor believe it, nor suppress it. The true self watches. The true self remains still. The true self has no narrative. The true self is awareness itself. Courage arises naturally when you live from the true self, because courage is not something you create. It is something you uncover. It is the natural state of a human being who is not controlled by thought. It is the steady, unshakable presence of a consciousness that sees through the illusions of fear. It is the calmness that emerges when the storm loses its power to deceive. Courage is the silence beneath the noise of thought. And yet, as you awaken, thought becomes louder for a time, not because fear is growing, but because awareness is. You begin to hear what was always there but was previously unnoticed. You begin to witness the frantic urgency of the mind, the constant intrusion of fearful images, the endless parade of negative predictions. The mind begins to feel like a wild animal, restless and loud. This noise is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of awakening. The mind has lost its ability to control you unconsciously. The thoughts must now shout to be heard. But shouting is not power. It is desperation. When awareness enters, thought becomes exposed. And when thought is exposed, fear begins to lose the secrecy it depends on. Secrecy is the oxygen of fear. Fear needs you not to look. Fear needs you to react automatically. Fear needs you to assume its voice is your voice. Fear needs darkness. Fear needs speed. Fear needs unconsciousness. Awareness removes all of these. When you slow down and watch thought instead of obeying it, you deprive fear of its power. When you observe fear without personalizing it, you break the identity link that gave fear authority. When you allow fear to exist without trying to escape it, you dissolve its illusion of danger. Fear without identification becomes sensation. Sensation without story becomes harmless. And harmless fear becomes courage. Courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is what remains when fear is seen clearly. This is why awakening can feel like dying, not physically, but psychologically. The thought-created identity begins to dissolve. The fear-built structures begin to collapse. The self you always believed yourself to be begins to fall away piece by piece. It feels as though you are losing something essential, but what you are losing is not you. It is the false self. The false self cannot survive the light of awareness, and this death of the false self is the birth of courage. However, this transformation is rarely gentle. The mind resists because the mind fears losing control. Thought is not alive, but it behaves like something struggling to survive. It throws up distractions, temptations, worries, fantasies, memories, anything to keep you believing in it, anything to pull you back into identification. You are not fighting thought. Thought is fighting your awareness, but awareness does not fight. Awareness watches. Awareness remains. Awareness does not argue with fear or try to overpower it. Awareness gives fear permission to exist without obeying it, and this permission dissolves the illusion of threat. Fear is always asking for obedience. Courage is simply refusing. As you continue to witness your thoughts, something extraordinary begins to happen. You start to feel a gap, a widening space between you and the mental noise. Thought moves, but you don't move with it. Fear speaks, but you don't answer. The old patterns rise, but you don't merge with them. This space is the doorway to freedom. It is the space where courage lives. It is the space where the real self emerges. It is the space where inherited thoughts lose their grip. It is the space where the mind's illusions crumble. It is the space where fear transforms into clarity. The beginning of courage is the end of unconscious thought. And once this process begins, even once, your life will never be the same again. As awareness deepens, you begin to feel something profound, something that cannot be described easily, something that does not rise in the form of thought or emotion. It is a shift in your center of gravity, a shift in who you believe yourself to be, a shift away from the restless mind and toward the quiet presence beneath it. You can sense that the true self is emerging from behind the veil of thinking, and for the first time in your life, the illusion of thoughts begins to lose its authority over your spirit. This emergence is subtle at first, not dramatic, not loud, not triumphant. It begins as a quiet confidence, a gentle clarity, a silent strength. You notice that situations which once triggered intense fear now provoke only a faint stirring. You notice that thoughts which once dominated your decisions now feel like distant echoes. You notice that emotional storms which once swept you away now pass through you without uprooting your peace. This is not numbness, it is awakening. The awakened mind does not eliminate emotion. It eliminates enslavement to emotion. Fear still arises, but it no longer enters your identity. Anxiety still appears, but it no longer becomes your master. Self-doubt still whispers, but it no longer persuades you. The mind still produces thoughts, but they do not define you. You are beginning to live from the witness, not the thinker. The thinker is reactive. The witness is still. The thinker is afraid. The witness is aware. The thinker obeys thought. The witness observes it. The thinker merges with fear. The witness sees fear as movement. This witnessing is the birthplace of courage. Courage is not an emotion. It is a state of consciousness. Courage does not rise from the body. It rises from awareness. Courage is not something you create. It is something you uncover when the illusion of thought dissolves. Fear cannot hold power over the one who sees it clearly. But the journey is not finished. Awareness is not yet stable. The mind, sensing its loss of control, begins to fight back. It becomes cunning, subtle, manipulative. It uses new thoughts to replace the old ones. If fear cannot overwhelm you, it will try to flatter you. If anxiety cannot control you, it will try to seduce you with fantasies. If insecurity cannot bind you, it will try to tempt you with ambition, pride, superiority. The mind will attempt anything to regain dominance. Do not be surprised by this. Thought is not alive, but the ego treats it as if it were. The ego survives by attaching itself to thought, by merging identity with mental noise, by convincing you that you are the voice inside your head. When awareness begins to break this bond, the ego panics. It disguises itself. It changes its tone. It pretends to be intuition. It pretends to be conscience. It pretends to be wisdom. It pretends to be spiritual insight. One of the last tricks of the mind is to imitate awakening. But even these clever illusions can be seen once awareness strengthens. A true intuition feels like clarity without emotion. A true insight feels spacious, not urgent. A true inner knowing does not flatter the ego. It humbles it. A true spiritual impulse does not tighten your chest. It opens it. A true conscience does not create fear. It reveals truth without punishment. The mind's deceptions always reveal themselves through tension. The moment you feel pressure, urgency, fear, flattery, pride, or emotional force, you are dealing with thought, not intuition. Awareness knows the difference. Awareness can sense the weight of the false and the lightness of the true. Awareness listens with the body, not the mind. As this discernment grows, fear begins to lose its very foundation. It cannot deceive. It cannot pretend. It cannot hide. It becomes exposed, naked, stripped of threat. And when fear is seen naked, it loses its meaning. This is when the transformation deepens. You begin to feel courage, not as a reaction to fear, but as an atmosphere of your being, a presence within you that does not rise and fall with circumstance. Courage becomes the ground of your consciousness, the steady foundation from which your actions flow. It is not dramatic, it is not heroic, it is quiet, effortless, unshakable. You move through the world differently. You listen without tension. You speak without fear. You walk without self-doubt. You face uncertainty without panic. You encounter challenges without collapsing into old narratives. Your presence changes because your center has changed. But as you grow spiritually, something unexpected happens. You begin to see other people's thoughts, fears, and illusions more clearly. Not because you are superior, but because you are no longer entangled in your own. You see the fear behind their anger. You see the insecurity behind their pride. You see the old wounds behind their defensiveness. You see the inherited thoughts speaking through their reactions. You begin to understand how deeply humanity is influenced by thoughts that do not belong to them. This understanding produces compassion, not weakness. Compassion rooted in clarity is strong. It does not enable dysfunction. It does not excuse harm. It simply sees the suffering behind the behavior. It recognizes the illusions that blind people to their true selves. And in this compassion, another layer of awakening begins. You stop taking people's behavior personally. When someone insults you, you hear their fear, not their judgment. When someone rejects you, you sense their wound, not your inadequacy. When someone manipulates you, you feel their desperation, not your helplessness. When someone lashes out at you, you see their past pain masquerading as present power. Awakening transforms your relationships because you no longer confuse another's thought-driven reactions with their true self. But there is a deeper shift still. As the illusion of thought dissolves, you begin to experience moments of profound silence, silence so deep that even your internal voice becomes quiet, not suppressed, not controlled, quiet. For the first time, you feel the difference between thoughtlessness and unconsciousness. Thoughtlessness is not emptiness, it is presence. Presence is the state of being before thought arises. Presence is the original mind. Presence is the ground of consciousness. Presence is the quiet radiance of your true nature. When you touch presence, even for a moment, you understand why thoughts have always felt foreign, because your true self is not made of thought. Presence is your native language. Thought is the translation. And when presence begins to grow, something extraordinary unfolds. Fear becomes transparent. You see its movements without believing its message. You sense its emotion without obeying its command. You witness its arrival without preparing for its consequences. Fear becomes like a ghost walking through a sunlit room, visible but powerless. Fear becomes an object. You become the subject. Awareness becomes the field in which fear appears and disappears. At this stage, you begin to understand courage at its deepest level. Courage is not something you do. Courage is what remains when fear's illusion collapses. Courage is the natural state of a human being who has stopped identifying with thought. Courage is the soul unmasked. This is why awakened courage feels peaceful, not aggressive. It feels grounded, not forceful. It feels steady, not explosive. It feels silent, not dramatic. Courage is the absence of illusion, not the presence of bravery. But even at this stage, the mind does not surrender instantly. It continues to generate fearful thoughts, because generating thought is its nature. The difference now is that these thoughts have nowhere to land. There is no longer a false self to absorb them. The soil of identification has dried up. The seeds of fear fall onto stone. Thoughts rise and fall without consequence. This is emotional invulnerability, not emotional suppression. Emotional suppression hardens the mind. Emotional invulnerability expands consciousness. Emotional suppression hides from fear. Emotional invulnerability sees fear and remains unmoved. This is the highest form of courage, inner stillness in the presence of fear. And it is from this stillness that your life begins to change in ways you could never have predicted. Opportunities that once terrified you become easy to step into. Conversations that once paralyzed you become simple. Decisions that once overwhelmed you become clear. Challenges that once broke you become gateways into new strength. Because the limitations you once believed in were built from thoughts, not truth. Life becomes more open, more fluid, more aligned, because you are no longer navigating reality through the filter of fear. You are no longer protecting a fragile identity held together by thought. You are no longer running from imaginary shadows. You are no longer obeying the illusions of the mind. Instead, you live from the quiet center of your being, steady, aware, awake. And from this center, you realize something breathtaking. Courage was never something you had to build. It was something that was always inside you, waiting beneath the noise of thought. Your courage was buried under illusions. Your truth was buried under thoughts. Your strength was buried under fear. When the illusion of thought dissolves, courage is not created, it is revealed. This revelation is not the end of your journey, but the beginning of a new one. A life lived from awareness rather than reaction. A life guided by presence rather than thought. A life shaped by truth rather than fear. A life rooted in the deepest knowing of who you truly are. You are not your thoughts. You never were. You never will be. You are the awareness in which all thoughts appear and disappear. You are the presence that remains when thought is silent. You are the courage that emerges when fear is seen for what it truly is, an illusion. This is the essence of awakening. This is the birth of courage. This is the end of fear's rule over your life and the beginning of your true self.